Haku is surprisingly not as aggressive as I thought it'd be. I thought he might end up being like one of those characters where he's actually kind of like maniacal in how he thinks, even though he's like a kid, kind of like in this almost like innocent evil kind of thing. But no, he just seems to be some nice dude, some just nice young lad who doesn't seem to be up for anything too chaotic, which is alright with me. Maybe, like, my guess is with Haku, the fact that he's the white tiger dragon, and obviously he's got like the kind of cat theme to his design, that maybe it's kind of like he's like very mood selective, kind of like a cat. He's not in the mood to kind of like fight people, so he kind of tries to avoid it, kind of like a scenario thing. But maybe that's in the same way, obviously, with toys and stuff. When he's actually fighting, it's kind of like how cats like kind of hunt and they play with their food, kind of thing. Obviously, this is just a guess. You know, that the weird thing, obviously, about their Dragon Eaters is they've all had really weird attributes. So trying to guess what they have is rough by default. But obviously, Haku's not helping anybody by his first display being, oh, he turns people into plush dolls. Like that just made it probably the most difficult to guess, because with Suzaku had a sword. It was, you know, a little bit still vague to guess, but there didn't seem to be anything kind of crazy in kind of just guessing it and like making estimations on like, okay, well, what's my guess gonna be towards whatever his is. And then Misaki's, we don't really get anything to help for her either. We kind of just get like some close-ups of her face. Like, she apparently she's very respected by Kiria. She's you know, sees her not only as like a power level superior, but certainly clearly sees her as like a superior in general, almost like a kind of like a idol figure. She's like calling her like older sister and stuff. So clearly there's a level of respect there that she looks up to her. So that does though kind of set up the idea of Urza being the opponent for Misaki, just because of that. Like, and you have Gray with Urza, but I feel like that's gonna have to get split up, because Urza and Misaki is like a match I could see. Obviously, Misaki should be stronger, but you know, Urza's the main cast member, so you know she could definitely grow stronger as stuff's going. And obviously, we haven't seen how they compare to Diablos members since going to Elantir and all the stuff with the critical magic and everything. I do like that we have the official translations now on some of the stuff, so it's critical magic instead of transcendent magic. Still really cool. It actually kind of makes sense in like the idea of how it affects Sora, but if that was a matchup that was like the setup, I think it'd be kind of strange. Not entirely, because with Kiria, I kind of like see like the weird shit, because like we already know that Urza is much stronger than Kiria, and Gray should be able to beat Kiria. That's a weird matchup too. I feel like it wouldn't be that difficult, like unless Mishima wants to use Kiria for a flex. But I'm still wishing that Kiria fights Lucy, because I think out of all of the Diablos people, she's like the most logical one for Lucy to fight. She's clearly the weakest. I think the only other person there would be kind of Mad Mole, but Mad Mole is not a power damage kind of character. He's obviously primarily a defensive character. And his, like, Lucy fighting him would probably go about the same as like her fighting Mimi. Because both Mad Mole and Mimi are you know, they're both tanks. You know, there's variations to how they fight and their abilities, but they're both kind of these, like, you know, the sillier members of the group, and they're tanks. So I think Lucy could potentially set up a similar scenario to how she ended up dealing with Mimi. Maybe even a little bit better, because Mad Mole doesn't seem to be as like aggressive of an advancing fighter as Mimi is. So maybe Lucy could actually do better. But other than that, I don't really see an opponent for her, unless like Mishima wants to give her something really crazy, like give her Misaki or something. I don't really know, because like some of the matches are really weird, because of like Suzaku can go in a lot of directions. Like if he ends up fighting Natsu or he ends up fighting Urza, like obviously rematch kind of setups, you know, it's very possible there. You know, Urza and Suzaku are both swordsman types. Suzaku and Natsu are both kind of like the leads of their respective team from a story standpoint, because clearly Suzaku definitely has a level of higher story importance, I think, than the other Dragon Eaters. It's very clear that Mishima likes him, and you know, obviously he's doing stuff with this character in the story. But right now, I'm really hyped for Kieran. Like, the Haku stuff, though, was neat. I really liked that we saw a little bit from each of the Black Dragon Slayer Knights this chapter. Really, we saw a little bit from all of Diablos. I really like would have appreciated more. There's still the possibility of Selene bringing reinforcements. Maybe Selene can do some extra stuff. Maybe Diablos has one extra member that we don't know about. Maybe it's Georg in the coffin, or if there is some form of bonus member that's like was a spot between the Black Dragon Slayer Knights and Georg. But I don't think so, just based off of this statement around Kieran that we got in the chapter from Selene. Not just like what he is saying or what somebody's kind of estimating, what is actually stated by Selene about Kieran's level of strength. But Haku, I actually kind of like that Haku wasn't aggressive, because like one thing about the Diablos members that has been very clear is they're not evil. They're not like, it's not like they're members of Tartaros where they're just killing people for fun, or like Grimoire, and they're just, they don't really mind like team killing. They're just way more brutal than your average like bad guy in the series. But with Diablos, it's been very clear they are an antagonist guild, but they aren't like evil bad guys. It's more of they're just on an opposing side than the Fairy Tail Guild. So Haku being a little boy and not, just kind of like going for like a murder makes sense to me. He just seemed like he just wanted to like win the game and enjoy himself. Not like in the same way of Selene, but he seemed pretty happy of just like what he was doing. He helped get, and the way that he even presented it initially with Lucy was he got Lucy out of the wall. So he helped her, but while doing so, he obviously kind of, quote unquote defeated her and Natsu, kind of just in a way that is more of like it's not a fight win, it's more like a CC win for anybody who's ever played like Warcraft or, stuff like that, like polymorphing somebody, and you just pretty much, you're not beating them or kind of like fully pulling them out of a fight. You're temporarily pretty much just doing some crowd control ability that is pushing them back. And there was a lot in this chapter that actually altered what I thought was going to happen. And this is definitely like a kind of confirming point of how it's going to be looked at in this chapter, because Selene counts Natsu and Lucy as temporarily down. She doesn't seem to count them as like fully out. I'm wondering what the criteria is for fully out, and like what it is that has to happen for you to be like actually like no longer able to join, or if it is just like you get knocked out or you're unable to fight, whatever it is, that's that's minus number. But if you get back up, then you still count. Like there's no elimination. It's more of just kind of like a status thing, and people are allowed to get up as many times as they can to get back up. What would be funny is like Wendy would probably be like Wendy realistically would be the best, other than probably Skullion inside of the labyrinth, because there's always going to be air, and the fact that there were all these adventures before them that went in and died. Probably find some bones around there. Maybe Kiri and Madmol can find some like shields and armor to consume and gain their stamina back. There's ways in there that like they can get back up and kind of do their thing, but we'll see. But other than that, like there's way more opportunities for people like that than any of them to really kind of get food. Like Gajil, I could see Gajil, because again, like if people left weapons and armor, then he could eat it and maybe just collecting dust, and he can just chomp on that to get stamina. I don't find it hard to believe that like Natsu could end up finding torches or something for fire. Laxus is definitely on the weird. I'm actually, Natsu could just like run in one of the booby traps that Wendy came across. Bam, fire food right there. But I mean, like with Laxus, he's not gonna find a lot of lightning down there. But it's actually kind of funny because Wendy, Madmol, and kind of Kira Gajil would thrive in this environment, because there's probably in Wendy's case, there's mostly going to be a bountiful amount of her element to eat. But for everybody else, their attribute is probably pretty, pretty easy to find. I would imagine it's something that they could realistically run across just being inside of a labyrinth. But I did like that Haku's magic affected other magics. I thought that was really cool. How like Virgo came out as a plush doll. Even like Lucy's key for Virgo was like a plush doll. Natsu apparently can't use this fire because it'll affect the body of like Cotton that he now has. Which makes me wonder how this power works. Again, it's such a weird ability, especially on a Dragon Slayer. If he just had magic, and this was whatever his spell was called, whatever it was called, and it's like, oh, I can turn stuff into dolls or whatever the effect is. I could see that, but the fact it's tied to a Dragon Slayer just makes it so weird. I really want to know what exactly Haku's attribute is, because it's got to be something really weird with it that also makes sense to his type. Because like Suzaku, Suzaku ultimately, though it wasn't what I expected, sword saint, and it makes sense for him having a sword. So like, what is it with these other ones? Unless he's not actually transforming them as an illusion, I don't really know. Because what it's like, well, what if the bell on his coat is actually he's doing sound or something, and it's messing with people's heads? I don't really know. Either way, it's definitely like a good hacks, and it's a useful ability. But also the monsters in the chapter were kind of neat, because I like that I really like that the labyrinth itself is pretty much made of Dogremag, so it has like Dragon God levels of durability, so you can't just bust through the walls. And even though these characters are so powerful, logically this is from somebody beyond them, so stuff like the monsters would be, within their too strong for them to really beat. Whereas like if we saw a character like Natsu burnt a bunch up, or Suzaku cut some up, we would know, oh wow, that's a sign of like strength. Like say at some point a character gets powered up, and then like they want to just show how much more powerful the character is without having to really do much, just have them destroy those guys, because that would obviously show they are above like Dogremag at that point, which would be a really, really easy kind of flex transition. But one thing actually in the chapter I wanted just to mention really quick about that, I thought that the monster scene was funny. One, I like the designs. They're all really weird looking. The weird Dogremag labyrinth kind of creatures. They're all kind of blocky in shape. But I like when Wendy is like dodging traps, and at the very end she's like, oh, so at least there aren't any monsters. And then like the monsters come out, and then it's just a panel of her being like, monsters. It's such a, like, you'd think there'd be like a panel after that, but it's like such a quick, clear cut. That's like a straight to commercial scene. That's just how it felt to me. But then there was like the part with Misaki and Kiria. It's a little weird, not in like a that much of a way, that like Kiria clearly has like a higher respect for Misaki, but you'd think it'd be for Suzaku, because I feel like I can understand why she would like Misaki, is obviously like a another powerful female dragon slayer, but like Suzaku is a he's in the same kind of general classification. He is a swordsman dragon slayer, and then like he's obviously much more powerful, so you figured that she would kind of like want to learn from him and kind of like shadow him and like kind of get tips from him on like how to just do better, because Suzaku definitely way outperforms Kiria. But there was a part with Misaki when we get a close-up of her eye, and obviously she does have that weird pupil, like the kind of star shape. So I'm guessing that she has an ocular ability, something in there. We don't have really any form of real guess on what exactly her Dragon Slayer attribute is, because all she did was kind of levitate something. And that doesn't really tell us anything at all about a Dragon Slayer attribute, unless it's gravity or something. But Haku doesn't really want to fight them. He just kind of like leaves a little dog plush toy to kind of chase after them. And we have more of like a funny moment for like Natsu, Lucy, and Happy, which I'm pretty alright for. I wanted to see Natsu fight a little bit, but I actually really enjoyed how it played out due to Haku's character, instead of it just being something that is ridiculous. Because obviously it makes sense they can't just go through walls, or like they're in a very restricted kind of environment, but also restricted in like a magic sense. But also again, it makes sense that a little boy that's in Diablos, when after again we've been shown time and time again that Diablos, though they can seem a little rough, they aren't an evil guild. They aren't cruel villains. They're just antagonists. Like they're only enemies to like the Fairy Tail Guild, pretty much because of like misunderstandings and issues between them that are more in just again an unexplained territory than anything. But yeah, so Kahaku's pretty happy that he took out 2 people, but Celine does say that they're only temporarily out of the game, and she doesn't say, she pretty much says the same thing about Skullion and Madmol, so I would assume they're also only temporarily out of the game. She doesn't differentiate when she says that like Natsu and Lucy are temporarily out, and then it says like the teams are now 5v5 instead. I'm just guessing, because one thing I did notice is with Madmol does have like, Madmol's eyes are pretty much closed. I mean, they're closed a lot of the time, but it looks more defeated than Skullion. Skullion, you still have his pupil. Like, he looks damaged. He looks hurt, but he doesn't look nearly as down as Madmol. Madmol looks like he is properly defeated. Like, I'm surprised he even had a dialogue box to show that he was conscious. He just looks flat out done. Whereas Skullion Scullion is kind of like how Kyria was when we first saw Kyria getting back to the Laxus fight back in Drasil, where she's hurt and clearly losing, but still conscious and still capable of fighting. That's how Scullion at least looks to me. I'm hoping Scullion gets back up. I really want to get some Scullion feats in this arc. I would really like to see Scullion, because we haven't realistically seen Scullion do anything since, I mean, really since like the fight he had with Gray. Like in terms of actually getting more insight to his dragon slaying magic. We saw a little bit more of his general usage when he fought Mirajane, but he really didn't do much in Drasil outside of like that skirmish with Mirajane, and then wasn't in Ellen Teardal. And I don't think he's out, because again, like the whole fact that Selene hasn't teleported anybody out, and she's already differentiated that there are temporary outs. So I'm guessing that maybe it's like as long as you're still conscious or something. Maybe if you're knocked out cold, she'll teleport you out. I would like to see some display of like a character, if there is a way to get eliminated from the game where you're permanently out of the labyrinth, and Selene, teleports you outside or something. I would like to see that. I don't know who I would like to see in that kind of position. I would kind of like it to be Kyria. Maybe if we could get a Lucy versus Kyria fight, or possibly Laxus. I kind of like the idea of Laxus losing, because again, Scullion and Madmol, as much as I like Scullion, it just makes sense to me that he would lose to Laxus after we saw the Kyria fight. I think Scullion is stronger than Madmol and Kyria, but I don't think it's nearly as much of a gap as obviously Kyria to Laxus. I think if you had a measurement, and one is Kyria and one end is Laxus, Scullion's in between those two, but probably more close to Kyria than it is close to Laxus. Granted, none of the Dragon Eaters are using Dragon Force, but we know that they can't just use that at the drop of a hat. Well, they can, but they can't use it as freely as that, because we know that it's like a last resort thing they're not supposed to use. But yeah, Scullion, as much as I want to see Scullion do stuff, it makes sense if he ran the Laxus that he'd be down. And it does give us a general kind of layout of obviously Laxus' strength and kind of getting him prepped up for his fight. Again, I'm just hoping at some point we can get a confirmation of a character getting knocked out, even if it's Laxus, or if it's just another character. If it's another character, if we get some confirmation that there is a way to get fully eliminated, or if we find out there is no elimination rule and they're just kind of in there, and even if they lose, they can get back up and rejoin the game. I'm kind of fine with either of them. I just kind of want to know, because we didn't really have anything again to go off when it came to Scullion and Madmol, but I'm guessing that they're only temporarily out again because she just talked about Lucy and Natsu and didn't say anything different about Scullion and Madmol. So let's hope. I would like to see them fight, even if Scullion just gets a fight with Gray, and I would assume it'd be more of like a display now of Gray's power to that he got more powerful and he could defeat Scullion this time. But I would like to see Scullion in action and like to see more of his Dragon Slayer techniques and stuff. I think that'd be really cool, and I do really like Scullion, so I would like to find out more about him. There's one thing I really want to get to with the Dragon Eaters, is similar to how when we see parts in characters' backstories of how they found the Fairy Tail Guild, or how Makarov found them and stuff. However, they got recruited pretty much and what led to the guild. I would love to see how Georg met each member of Diablos. I don't think we can see all of them, but I would like to at least see it for some of them, like Kirin or Suzaku, because the Dragon Eaters as a concept are really intriguing in the fact that they wouldn't have had their Dragon and Slayer abilities for that long. Whereas in the story, maybe a couple years, and they're this powerful, but we know obviously how powerful Dragon Slayers are, and 5th gen seems to be just a different method that's a faster power scale, but a much more dangerous risk. Obviously, why Dragon Force is way different. It's not like a pop-in, pop-out ability. It's it's not like Super Saiyan, it's more like Endura. If you know this, I mean, everybody knows Super Saiyan, but kind of like how Super Saiyan is more of pop it on, get more powerful, and then you run out of power, you kind of simmer down and you deform. Whereas Insanely Sin's Endura was something you had to sacrifice your hearts to achieve this super monster demon form and become this lifeless this mindless monster, which is essentially what 5th gen Dragon Force does. But at the point when Selena's like, now it's 5v5, and she's like saying how Laxus, obviously knowing about Laxus, which is again very intriguing about Selene, because Selene knows stuff. Selene knows a lot of stuff. Like, there's no way that Selene doesn't. She's centuries old. She can freely cross dimensions, go anywhere she wants at any point. Nobody really can fight back against her except the other dragon gods. So her knowing and having a large grasp on information has always made sense to me. And again, now it means that she knows more personal stuff about the Fairy Tail members, so she probably looked into it at one point. So she's got to know about Urza as well, and maybe even about Natsu and his relations to like Zeref and stuff. There's a lot of potential in what she can just reveal story-wise. But she's saying that like Laxus is currently a contender for Fairy Tail Strongest. Obviously contender. Base-wise, like, because I would definitely say like top 3 is still, excluding Dragon Force, it goes Gildarts, Laxus, Natsu, but obviously Natsu with Dragon Force is the strongest in the guild. But in terms of just like base form, Laxus is definitely, I would say, in second place and a contender for the top. And it's also one thing that I'll save it for a different video. Something about like my stuff with Gildarts, but it's definitely a little bit of a nod, I think, into kind of moving him further into that position of strongest in the guild. Besides Natsu, obviously, because it's different when you're outright more powerful than somebody rather than like you have to use your strongest form to beat them. Because I definitely think that like Laxus can take Fire Dragon King Mode Natsu and stalemate him, but like once Natsu goes Dragon Force, it's over. But her saying that, obviously knowing this about Laxus, saying he's a contender, and then Kirin shows up and she says that now the 2 contenders for the strongest are gonna fight. And when she says that, there's one thing obviously about the Black Dragon Slayer Knights is they're equal to Suzaku. Suzaku was the one that we saw first. He's the one that we're basing them off of. It's kind of like how with the Dragon Gods, we can kind of base them a little bit off of Acnologia, but we can also base them off of each other because we know that they're all equal to each other. I don't think that it's as much as Kirin is automatically like the strongest out of the 4 Black Dragon Slayer Knights. I think it's more of like if you had to bet on one of them, like if they actually all fought, who would be the most likely to win would be Kirin. So maybe it's not entirely that he's outright more powerful. Maybe he's just better with his abilities and he's just a better fighter. It's still a big question mark. We don't know what he does. We don't know what his abilities are. I still hope so bad that he's a Radiation Dragon Slayer and we can see that like Radiation versus Lightning or something. Yeah, it's high on my list, and like the only thing I really have for this is like the fact that like the radiation symbol is like black and yellow, and that's kind of Kirin's color. But we'll see. Mishima could do something super wild, or he could do something way more grounded. I definitely just want to see what it is. I'm super impatient whenever it comes to getting reveals on like specifics about abilities. Like in this case, whatever their Dragon Slayer attribute is. I don't know if we'll get Haku and Misaki in the next chapter. But I'm guessing with this ending, we'll get Kirin's probably in the, like, I would like to believe in the next chapter we're gonna get Kirin's attribute. We'll get like a display of what his attribute is during his fight with Laxus. But the last thing I really wanted to talk about was how I want the fight to go. And when I do my predictions, I'll talk more about how I kind of want, like how I want like the next chapter specifically to go. But how I would love the fight to go would be kind of like a reverse situation of Urza and Laxus. We went into the fight, Urza fighting Laxus, had a lot of people thought Urza was going to win. She's way more connected to the main cast. She's got that kind of like protagonist side boost, while Laxus was a mind-controlled antagonist at that point. And Urza was so close, but Laxus just, by the skin of his teeth was able to pull a victory. And I think it'd be really cool to not only would it, be able to build up Laxus, like give Laxus like a, limit breaking kind of like a moment where he would have to get more powerful, because we know that the Black Dragon Slayer Knights, like each of them should be stronger than Laxus, at least currently. We don't know if Laxus unlocked Dragon Force at some point recently. I don't think so. But, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he could unlock it in this fight. Because that's definitely something that will hurt the Dragon Eaters, the fact that they can't use Dragon Force. Because really, like, when I was thinking about, like, what they could get nerfed by in the exchange of, like, not getting motion sickness or something, it was like, well, maybe they can't eat their attribute. But not having Dragon Force is actually, like, a really dangerous thing, at least for them, because it means that their trump card is it is a last go only. We don't know if they ever gain their sanity back after transforming into a dragon. But yeah, the stuff right now, I think that it would be really cool to kind of like just have this really nice fight between them, like a 2 to 3 chapter fight. And it ends pretty much like with Laxus losing. It kind of just think of the same way of Laxus versus Urza, where instead Laxus falls and Kieran wins the fight, but he kind of also falls, but it's more of like how Laxus just kind of sat down out of magic and tired. We could get that for Kieran, but then Kieran could kind of like get energized back faster because maybe whatever his attribute is, or you know, whatever circumstances that would have him regain magic and stamina quicker than Laxus. Maybe it's because he's conscious and Laxus could be unconscious. Because it also doesn't have to worry about anything like the idea of, like, if a good guy loses to the bad guy, it's like, well, then the bad guy just kind of kill him or execute him in some senses. This could easily be a instance where we wouldn't have to worry too much about, because so far, the only person in Diablos that really kind of, like, gives off a little bit of a crazy vibe is Kyria, with, like, saying how she's going to eat other dragon slayers. I guess Nibiru, too, yeah, but the other Dragoners have been a lot more calming and seem way more kind of, like, mentally stable, so we'll see how that actually goes. But I am very excited for this fight. I want to see this super bad and see what Laxus can do, because this is definitely a fight where Laxus is at a disadvantage. And this isn't like Laxus versus Wall, where Laxus was, you know, he had the whole nerf with the anti-magic devil particles. It's not like his fight with Acnologia Urza group fight. It's not like his fight with Urza, where he was clearly like the more powerful opponent from early on in the fight. Laxus is definitely in a spot where he's gonna have to have one of those moments where he's got to break his limits and overcome if he does win. I still would really like it if Kieran would lose. Would win and Laxus would lose. It would be kind of like how Tartarus opened up, but instead of Tempesta pretty much doing like a cheat move in order to poison Laxus, it could be done in a way more of a sense of, instead of, oh yeah, this guy's hacks, he's dangerous, you know, look up his ability, it's just like, this guy is powerful if he's taking down Laxus. And it could be like after a point where Laxus has a power, like imagine Laxus getting true Dragon Force, like an actual Dragon Force for his magic, but he's still not able to overcome Kieran entirely. It's just kind of like a match ending with like a split second decision, but in Kieran's favor. I think that would be really cool, and it would automatically give like a big precedence for the Dragoners without making them seem unbeatable, just making them seem like this massive wall, this extremely big wall of characters that is threatening. Because you could do it like the way that it's set up, and you know, I've been rambling a bit, but I do really like the idea of it could just be, you know, he loses, both of them collapse, and it's like, okay, well, both of these big characters are out of the fight for a bit. But say a couple chapters in, you just see like Selene mention something about the number going up, and then you get like this panel of Kieran back on his feet, and you just get maybe like this really cool setup with him kind of getting up in his cloaks, kind of one of those ones where it's like given way more detail, and there's not a lot of dialogue on the page, whether it's like a full page, or like maybe one of those kind of like ones that takes up most of the page, or a double spread. I don't know, something really cool. It's gonna depend, I think, on how much they like Kieran. Like Mishima, I don't know if Kieran is a character he likes. This Suzaku is definitely somebody that he likes, but I feel like each of the Black Dragon Slayer Knights have a lot of hype and position around them, where he can give each of them a big showing. Because with the other members of Diablos, Skullion, Madmal, and Kyria, he doesn't have to do much exposition on them, because we already know stuff about them, and we already know where they kind of sit. Whereas we know where the Black Dragon Slayer Knights sit, but we don't know what the other three are capable of entirely, and we don't really know what they're going to bring to the table in this kind of whole scenario. So we'll see. Other than that, this was definitely a pretty hype part. I like the funny parts. I did think the part with Haku was nice, and it did show again another human side to the Dragoners, and obviously Haku not being a maniacal killer. Instead, he's actually, you know, goes about it like a young kid, not wanting to murder the people that he just met. He's like competing against in a game. But as it is, definitely a solid one. The Kieran Laxus one was something that I think some people definitely could predict, not like in a bad way, but it was one of the people that was like the best guess for like fighting Laxus. I was wondering if it was either going to be Laxus or Godjill, but we'll see exactly how this goes, because the fact they have the two big people fighting early tells me that like Mishima is gonna do something a little wild. Because like, for instance, just something I want to mention near the before I finish, like per se initially. And it's kind of similar to Tartaros. Initially, Mishima was going to have the first day of the Grand Magic Games. It was going to be Jura versus Laxus. And given the setup of how the first day went, where Fairy Tail like lost pretty much everything that they competed in, it was probably going to be a loss. And then we had Tartaros, where Laxus was taken out of commission. And though one of those events was changed, it just still shows that Mishima knows that Laxus is a really good kind of bar setting for like the story. Like the idea of a character beating him or stalemating him, it's like Gildarts, where you know that guy's a big deal because he's able to compete at this level, and he's able, and like Mishima would be willing to actually like put them in a bad spot. Like anybody that kind of like sits around with like some of his favorites and like the bigger people like Natsu, Laxus, Jalal, Gildarts, those are the ones that you know that just kind of like competing with these guys gives these characters like a level of threat by themselves, and it shows that like they're actually able to contend with some of the bigger people around. Because outside of them, you really only have like antagonists at this point. There's not really much for other people that are around level with them, except for I'd say some of the Spriggan, like people like Invul and Demaria if she ever comes back, Brandish. Because like some of the Spriggan that are closer to the upper ones, but with August and Irene gone, it's like there's not really much outside that is like that's around that big level as like, again, like Gildarts, Laxus, and all them. Other than Georg, but well, Georg's not alive anymore, but he would still count as an antagonist. We don't have a lot of really powerful protagonists right now. I mean, there's stuff with potential with like Gray and stuff, but we'll see. Other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, but friend, like, punch, subscribe button, check out my other videos. But in that, share, subscribe. Thank you all for listening. Bye.